This is the Podcast Lab. Subscribe now and never miss an episode.
Been to procrastination today.
Oh, yeah. Looks like someone's been doing their homework.
Haha. Well, I tried to bring a nice stack of research and articles.
That's great. I'm excited to see what we can unpack.
Me too. I mean, I've already learned a ton just skimming through it all.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, for instance, one article on mindtools.com, it said that something like 95% of people procrastinate.
Wow.
I know, right?
That's a lot of people.
It is. It's kind of comforting to know I'm not alone, but kind of scary too.
It's true. It's a very common experience. But just because it's common doesn't mean we have to accept it.
Right.
I think there's a lot we can learn from all these materials about how to manage it better.
For sure. And speaking of managing it, there was this quote from the Diary of a CEO podcast.
Okay.
That really, it really stuck with me. They said, time management is pain management.
That's powerful.
I know.
Yeah.
Like every time I procrastinate now,
Right.
I just think about that.
It speaks to the emotional side of it, right? Yeah.
For sure.
It's not always about laziness.
Right.
Sometimes we avoid things because of how they make us feel.
Absolutely.
Fear, anxiety, self-doubt.
For sure.
But before we dive into all that, I kind of want to get back to the basics a little.
Yeah, no, please.
You mentioned some terms earlier, like
Right.
temporal motivation theory and...
and like dopamine and all that stuff. I have to admit, I'm a little intimidated.
Oh, it's not that bad. Temporal motivation theory just means, essentially,
Yeah.
that we're more likely to do something if it seems valuable and if it has to be done soon.
Okay, so like the closer the deadline,
Exactly.
the more motivated I am, even if the task isn't that important.
Exactly. Or even if it's a really big, important task,
Right.
if it's due months from now,
Yeah.
it's easy to put it off.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm curious, looking at the stuff you sent over, is there anything that you've been putting off that fits that pattern?
Ooh, now that you mention it, yeah. Reorganizing my office.
Okay.
It would make a huge difference to my productivity.
Right.
But every weekend, something more fun comes up.
And it keeps getting pushed back.
It does. It's so frustrating.
Well, recognizing it is the first step. And this temporal motivation theory, it helps us see that it's not just a willpower thing.
Right.
It's really how our brains work.
So it's not just me being lazy.
Not necessarily.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better.
Good. So moving on to dopamine.
Okay, yeah.
This is that neurotransmitter, the pleasure chemical.
Right.
And research suggests that for procrastinators, our brains might be wired a bit differently when it comes to that.
Okay, what do you mean? Like we don't get enough dopamine?
Well, not quite. It seems like for some people, that dopamine rush, that reward feeling, doesn't really kick in until things are urgent.
Oh my gosh, yes. That is so me.
Really?
Yes. Like I need that last minute pressure to actually get anything done.
So you thrive under pressure.
I guess so. It's not healthy though.
Well, that artificial urgency,
Yeah.
it kind of creates this false deadline,
Right.
which then triggers the dopamine.
So my brain's tricking me into thinking everything's a crisis.
In a way, yeah.
Ugh. No wonder I'm always stressed.
Well, and that brings us back to that quote you mentioned.
Right. Time management is pain management.
Because sometimes we procrastinate to avoid those uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Like we were saying earlier, it's not always about the task itself.
Right.
It's about the emotions tied to it.
Okay, so we've got this temporal thing where my brain thinks future deadlines don't matter.
Right.
And then the dopamine thing where I need urgency to get motivated. But the Diary of a CEO podcast also talked about fear.
Yes. Fear is a huge piece of this puzzle.
So where does that fit in?
Well, a lot of times we procrastinate on things that threaten our self-esteem.
Okay.
Like if we think we're going to fail or it won't be good enough,
Yeah.
we just avoid it altogether.
Yeah. Right. It's easier to just not do it than to risk feeling like a failure.
Exactly.
I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah. Was there anything specific in the materials you sent that stood out to you on this fear factor?
It wasn't explicitly stated, but now that we're talking about it,
Yeah.
I'm realizing a pattern. I always procrastinate on the things that make me feel like an imposter.
Oh, interesting.
So like applying for that promotion
Oh, yeah.
or finally launching my side business, stuff where if I fail, everyone will know I'm a fraud.
That's a very common fear and something we can definitely explore further.
Okay, good. Because
In the next part of our deep dive,
yeah,
we're going to look at some strategies for actually overcoming these patterns.
I'm ready for that because this whole pain management thing, it's really resonating with me. Like every time I procrastinate, I'm just trying to protect myself from feeling bad.
In a way, yes.
But then I end up feeling worse in the long run.
That's the irony, right? The guilt, the stress of last-minute scrambling.
Yeah.
It all creates its own kind of turmoil.
So it's like a vicious cycle.
It can be, but the good news is there are ways to break free.
Okay, good.
In the next part, we'll talk about some proven strategies.
Awesome. I'm ready for those procrastination busting tactics.
All right, let's do it.
All right, so my brain is officially full of procrastination knowledge.
Good.
But now I'm ready for the how-to part.
Okay, so it's not really about eliminating procrastination entirely. It's more about, being more intentional with our time and energy.
Okay, so like more mindful procrastination.
Not quite. But one thing I want to emphasize, based on all this research you sent, is self-compassion.
Self-compassion. So like when I inevitably fail and end up watching like 6 hours of reality TV instead of working,
right,
I should just be nice to myself.
It's more than just being nice. It's about understanding that everyone makes mistakes.
Right.
And that procrastination is a common struggle.
Okay.
The positivepsychology.com article you sent.
It actually talks about how beating yourself up just makes things worse.
Oh, that's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah, my self-talk when I'm procrastinating is pretty brutal.
What do you mean?
It's like, ugh, you're so lazy, you'll never get anything done.
Ooh.
Just a downward spiral of self-hate.
That kind of negative self-talk.
Yeah.
It just reinforces those fears and insecurities.
Right, which makes me want to avoid work even more.
Exactly. So how do we break that cycle?
Yeah, what does self-compassion actually look like?
It's about treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a friend.
Okay.
Instead of berating yourself for procrastinating.
Right.
Just acknowledge it.
Okay.
Without judgment.
So like, hey, I'm procrastinating right now, but it's okay.
Yeah. Or I'm feeling overwhelmed, so I'm going to take a break, but I'll come back to this later.
Huh. I never really give myself permission to do that.
It's important. There's actually research showing that self-forgiveness can actually reduce procrastination in the future. Wow. Okay. So next time I catch myself procrastinating, I should just forgive myself and move on.
Exactly.
Okay, I can try that. But what about actually getting started on things?
Right. So the mindtools.com article had a bunch of tips.
It did, like a million tips.
It can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
But I think a good place to start is with clear goals.
Okay.
One reason we procrastinate is just feeling overwhelmed by the sheer size of a task.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
If I write clean the entire house on my to-do list,
right,
I'm guaranteed to procrastinate.
But if you break it down, clean the kitchen counters, vacuum the living room.
Right, smaller chunks.
It feels much more manageable.
Absolutely. That's why I love that bite-sized Pomodoro idea from the Med School Insiders video.
Oh yeah, the Pomodoro technique.
Instead of studying for hours, you just do like 25 minutes at a time.
Exactly. It's a great way to trick your brain into getting started.
Totally. Speaking of tricking your brain, what was that 2-minute rule again?
Oh, that's a good one. Basically, if something takes less than 2 minutes, just do it.
Okay.
Don't even think about it. Just do it.
Right.
And for bigger tasks, commit to working on them for at least 2 minutes.
Okay.
That initial momentum can be really powerful.
I love that, especially for those tiny tasks that pile up and make me feel overwhelmed.
Exactly. It's all about outsmarting that procrastination instinct.
Okay, so clear goals, break things down, the 2-minute rule.
And sometimes it's as simple as changing your environment.
What do you mean?
Well, the McGraw Center article talked about having a dedicated workspace.
Oh, so like not working from the couch.
Right. Your brain needs those cues to know it's time to focus.
Okay, I can see that. But honestly, sometimes even when I'm at my desk, I get sucked into the internet black hole.
Oh, tell me about it. Social media, news articles, random YouTube videos.
It's endless.
It is. But there are ways to manage those distractions.
Okay, like what?
Well, a lot of the articles you sent recommended turning off notifications, using website blockers, and even scheduling specific times for checking social media.
Wait, schedule time for social media. How does that help?
It's about being intentional. The Diary of a CEO podcast called it time boxing.
Time boxing.
Yeah, like you plan out your whole day.
Okay.
Block out time for work, breaks, even fun stuff like social media.
So I'm allowed to have fun.
Of course.
Yeah.
And by scheduling it in,
you're
less likely to feel guilty about it.
Huh. That's interesting. So instead of fighting the urge to check my phone, I could just build it into my day.
Exactly. It goes back to that time management is pain management idea.
Oh, right.
When we constantly deny ourselves those little pleasures, it creates the sense of deprivation, which can actually lead to more procrastination.
It's like I'm rebelling against my own rules.
Exactly. It's all about finding a balance that works for you.
Okay, so time boxing, self-compassion, setting realistic goals, even scheduling some fun.
It's all starting to come together.
It is. But what about those tasks that I just dread? Even when I break them down, they still fill me with dread.
Well, the McGraw Center article had a good point about that. They talked about finding productive reasons for doing things.
What does that mean?
It's about shifting your focus from external rewards to the intrinsic value of the task.
So like instead of focusing on getting a good grade to please my boss, I might focus on how this project will help me learn new skills.
Exactly. Or how it will benefit your team or make a positive impact.
Okay, so finding those internal motivators.
Right. It's about finding that spark that will make you want to do it.
I can see how that would be helpful, but what if I'm just not feeling those sparks?
Well, that's where accountability comes in.
Oh,
Several articles mention that.
Yeah, the accountability button.
Exactly. Having someone to check in with. To celebrate your wins and offer encouragement.
It's like having a cheerleader.
Exactly. That external support can be really powerful.
This reminds me of something from the Diary of a CEO podcast.
What's that?
They talked about how nurses wearing do not disturb vests.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
It drastically reduced errors.
Because it sent a clear signal.
Right. And it made me think about all the external triggers that make me procrastinate. It's not just my phone. It's my kids, my partner, my dog.
It's all those interruptions.
Yes.
So managing those external triggers is crucial.
It's like creating a procrastination-free zone.
Exactly. And that brings us to another interesting point from the podcast.
Okay.
The idea that procrastination can sometimes be rooted in deeper issues.
Like what?
Even past trauma.
Oh, wow.
It's a heavy topic, but it's worth considering.
Yeah.
Our past experiences can definitely shape our behavior.
So, like, if you learn to avoid things as a kid to protect yourself, you might still be doing that as an adult.
Exactly. And it might be subconscious.
That's a lot to think about.
It is. But remember, procrastination is complex.
Right.
There are so many factors at play.
But the good news is,
yes,
there are solutions.
Absolutely. There are proven strategies that can help.
All right, so I've got self-compassion, goal setting, managing distractions, finding intrinsic motivation, external accountability, and even the potential role of past trauma.
It's a lot, I know.
It is. But before we wrap up, there's one thing from the Diary of a CEO podcast that I keep thinking about.
Oh, what's that?
They said that high performers, they experience the same triggers as everyone else, like stress and anxiety.
Right.
But they use them to fuel their action.
Isn't that interesting?
It is. How do they do that?
It's about reframing those feelings.
Okay.
Instead of saying, I'm stressed, so I can't work, they say, I'm stressed because this is important, so I need to focus.
Wow, so it's like a mindset shift.
Exactly. It's about harnessing those feelings instead of letting them control you.
That's powerful.
And the podcast also talked about reimagining the trigger.
What does that mean?
It's about choosing to interpret those feelings in a way that empowers you. So if you feel anxious about a project, you could reframe that anxiety as excitement.
So instead of I'm anxious because I might fail, it's I'm excited because this could be amazing.
Exactly. It's about flipping the script.
I love that.
So it's not just about managing your time.
Right.
It's about managing your mind.
Wow, this has been so eye-opening. I actually feel hopeful about overcoming procrastination now.
That's great to hear. And remember, it's a journey.
Yeah.
Be patient with yourself, celebrate your wins, and keep experimenting until you find what works.
Okay, so we've explored why we procrastinate, and we've got all these tools to fight it.
We do.
But before we end this deep dive,
yes,
I want to ask one final, maybe provocative question.
I'm all ears.
So we talked a lot about the fear of failure.
We did.
What about the fear of success?
Oh, interesting.
Could that also be a factor in procrastination?
I think it's definitely possible.
Right, because success can bring its own challenges.
Absolutely. More responsibility, more pressure, changes in your relationships. Right. And for some people, that might be scary.
Yeah, it's like, what if I achieve everything I want, and then what?
Exactly. Will I still be light? Will I be able to handle it?
It's the fear of the unknown.
And that fear can be paralyzing.
It can. And it might lead us to procrastinate on those very goals we're chasing.
So how do we deal with that? It seems counterintuitive, right? to be afraid of success.
It does, but I think it starts with awareness, acknowledging that this fear might be there.
And then what?
Well, then you can start exploring those fears.
Like, what is it about success that scares me?
Exactly. Is it the fear of change? The fear of judgment?
And once we know what we're afraid of, we can start to challenge those fears.
Right. Ask yourself, what's the evidence for this fear? Is it real or just a story I'm telling myself?
So it's like reframing the fear of success, just like we reframe the fear of failure.
Exactly. And it might also involve setting smaller goals.
Okay.
So that success feels less overwhelming.
Like baby steps towards the bigger goal. Exactly. And remember, the journey is just as important as the destination.
I love that.
So be kind to yourself, celebrate the small wins, and keep moving forward.
This has been such a great conversation. We went from wanting to stop procrastinating to like deep philosophical discussions about success and fear.
It's all connected, right?
It is. And it all comes back to that idea that procrastination is often a symptom.
Of something deeper.
Yeah, a sign that we need to pay attention to our emotional well-being.
Exactly. So what's the takeaway for our listeners?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that you're not alone. Procrastination is normal, and there's help out there.
But it's also important to remember that it can be a sign of something deeper.
Right, and if you're really struggling, it might be time to seek professional help.
Absolutely. So what's one thing our listeners can do right now to start tackling their procrastination?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think the best thing to do is choose one strategy we talked about and commit to trying it this week.
It could be setting smaller goals, practicing self-compassion.
Or scheduling in some fun time.
Exactly. Whatever resonates with you.
Just take that first step.
Remember, progress, not perfection.
Yes. Be kind to yourself. Celebrate your wins.
And keep experimenting.
All right, that's it for our deep dive on procrastination.
Thanks for joining us.
We hope you learned something new.
And until next time, happy creating.
So we've really dug deep into this whole procrastination thing.
We have. It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is. And it's made me realize that it's so much more than just being lazy.
Right. It's not about willpower.
Yeah, it's like there are all these underlying reasons why we do it.
Exactly.
Fears, anxieties, even past experiences.
Like we were talking about with those nurses wearing the do not disturb vests.
Oh, right. It's like procrastination is our own version of that vest.
A way to protect ourselves, to signal that we're not ready.
To face something difficult.
Exactly. And those avoidance tactics, they might have worked in the past.
Right, like they helped us survive tough situations.
But now, they might be holding us back.
From achieving our goals, from really living our lives.
And the more we understand this, the more compassion we can have for ourselves.
Yeah, that's so important.
Yeah.
Because when we beat ourselves up for procrastinating,
right,
it just makes it worse.
It does. So instead of judgment, we need curiosity.
Curiosity.
Yeah, like instead of criticizing yourself, get curious about it.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, when you find yourself procrastinating, ask yourself, what's going on here?
What am I feeling?
Exactly. What need is this procrastination trying to meet?
It's like turning it into a puzzle to solve.
Exactly. Instead of a problem to be ashamed of.
And once we understand those underlying reasons,
yeah,
we can find better solutions.
Right, because if it's fear of failure, maybe you need to build your confidence.
Or if it's fear of success, maybe you need to challenge those limiting beliefs.
It's all about self-awareness.
And that brings us back to that quote, time management is pain management.
It all ties together.
By managing our time, we're also managing our emotions.
And that includes scheduling time for rest and play.
Right, not just work.
Remember time boxing. It's about finding that balance.
Between discipline and self-care.
Yeah, finding a rhythm that works for you.
And I think that's the biggest takeaway for me from all of this.
What is it?
It's not about being perfectly productive all the time.
Right.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Beautifully said.
And it's about being kind to ourselves along the way.
Absolutely. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. What works for me might not work for you.
And that's okay.
So as we wrap up, I want to challenge our listeners.
Okay, I like this.
Think about everything we've talked about today.
Mm-hmm.
What's one small step you can take this week?
To break free from procrastination.
It could be anything, setting a timer, reaching out to a friend.
Or just noticing your procrastination without judgment.
Just take that first step.
Remember, you're not alone.
We're all in this together.
So let's go out there and experiment. Be kind to ourselves.
And keep moving forward.
And that's our deep dive on procrastination.
Thanks for joining us.
We hope you learned something new.
Until next time, happy creating.